What? The problem we're trying to solve is that there are rich teams and there are poor teams. Then there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's us.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. Have a seat, relax, make yourself comfortable. Do whatever it is you do when you're listening to podcasts, and I will take care of the rest. Today on the show, I talk with David Gardner. He is the co-founder of The Motley Fool. He is the host of the Rule Breaker Investing podcast, which is now in its 11th year. And earlier this week, his new book was released. It's called Rule Breaker Investing: How to Pick the Best Stocks of the Future and Build Lasting Wealth. And it's great, which is not surprising because David is a great writer. But if I'm being completely honest, well, let me back up. I read this book because last month, David asked me to come on his podcast. His podcast is about stocks and investing, but for the month of August, he interviews authors. And he asked me to come on his show and interview him, which I gotta say, I thought that was a clever idea, because what's the point of having your own podcast if you're not going to use it to promote your own book? And having someone interview him, I think, is just a more interesting way to do it rather than just talking about it by himself. So he asked if I would interview him on the show. I said yes. Then I got an advance copy from the publisher. And here's the thing, though. I know all about David's investing style. I started working at The Motley Fool in 1997. I know his approach to investing, the traits that he looks for in a rule breaker stock, how he puts together a portfolio. And all these things are in the book. I was expecting all of that. What I was not expecting was to be surprised by the book. And I was. There are these wonderful wrinkles and tangents and behind the scenes stories that David shares in the book that I was not expecting. And it elevates an already great book into something special. Now, having said all of that, we don't really talk about the book that much in this conversation you're about to hear. This is much more about David's lifelong relationship with money. And even though we've known each other for close to 30 years, there are stories that he shares that I've never heard before, including the unlikely technology mentor that he had early in his life, and the area of investing where, by his own admission, he is mediocre. So let's get to it with David Gardner. What is your first memory of money?
My first memory of money is probably that I was putting it in the church plate that got passed around. I think I'm not the only one who was raised Catholic on the podcast this week.
You are not.
And I'm pretty sure we were handed money by our parents, and we just sort of put it in, and it was coins. And back then, coins were actually in circulation, and it was sort of how things work. So I can kind of hear the clink, although I think it had sort of a soft velvet bottom, so there wasn't like a clank. Otherwise, it would be an obnoxious thing going through a church service. But yeah, I think that was probably sort of a regular association when I actually think about money, as opposed to things like stocks or other things that mean money to me, but aren't money.
So I think anyone who...
Holy Trinity Church, Georgetown, Washington, D.C., for anybody who's, shout out to
Holy Trinity. I think anyone who knows a bit about you and your history and your life in investing is familiar with the fact that your father taught you investing at an early age. And I will get to that in a second. I'm curious, though, to what extent, if any, was money discussed in the house that you remember that didn't have anything to do with investing? It was just, basic money topics.
Yeah, I would say that was not a regular part of household conversation. My parents were generally well-to-do. They were from families. Both of my grandfathers were entrepreneurs. My dad and mom were not business people per se. My dad was a banking lawyer. The one thing he said to us as kids, raised on our daddy's knee, was, kids, the one thing you can't be when you grow up is a lawyer. So don't be a lawyer, what I've done. And he was actually quite serious about that. And some of my best friends are lawyers, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but Dad felt, I think, that his work wasn't as creative or generative enough. And maybe it's because he had been raised by a father who started his own company, eventually sold it to AMF Voigt, big conglomerate back in the 50s. It actually is the company that has ended up being DeWalt, the tool company. So I think my dad grew up in a household of somebody who was cranking as an entrepreneur, and Dad went to Harvard Law School, great schooling and all the rest. But I think that he just sort of didn't feel like he was being creative and generative enough. Anyway, so our conversations weren't really about money. And it's not because we had all we needed or it was never a problem. It was just that my mother was much more interested in talking about Oscar Wilde or My Fair Lady or Gone with the Wind, her favorite movie. And my dad just really loved the markets. And you might think that that's money, but I don't think that was your question, Chris. It was about money.
No, we've talked about this before. It's, one of the ways to look at investing, particularly if you are curious about the world, is to focus on the businesses as opposed to the stock price. And what is the story of this business? What are they trying to do? Who are their competitors? It can be as compelling as any fictional novel. I mean, there are plenty of boring companies out there too, but there are, some really compelling stories in the market. And I'm assuming, particularly with what you said about your father being kind of a frustrated lawyer, lacking creative outlets in his profession, that was probably part of the appeal, I guess.
I think that's fair. In fact, our big stock growing up was the Washington Post Company. I grew up in Washington, D.C. The product was on our doorstep every morning. And it was a fantastic company with a great story behind it. Warren Buffett was on the board. The only time I've ever met Warren Buffett is not ever as an adult. It was as a 15-year-old kid going to the Washington Post annual meeting with my dad, one of those years that we went to the annual meeting right in downtown Washington, D.C. But, the Graham family, just a great multi-generational family. Katharine Graham, her story now put up in Hollywood silver screen. But that was like an example of a stock for us. And I know because I've told the story many times, and we've worked together many years, Chris. So you know my chocolate pudding story. And I'll just share it for Money Unplugged listeners who haven't heard me do this 17,000 times. But it's a true story. And so right in Washington, D.C., we'd go down to the Safeway in Georgetown. And my dad would say, hey, kids, look, chocolate pudding. We own some of the company that makes that chocolate pudding, a few shares, thanks to the stock market. Let's go get more chocolate pudding. And that made him a great dad. That made him somebody who, from an early age, he was connecting us with the idea that the products and services that are all around us, so many of them are created by for-profit companies, competing, by the way, against other for-profit companies who are hoping that we'll buy their chocolate pudding or read their newspaper, not that other one. And the game of it has always appealed to me. And that's because my dad is a gamer, and he definitely brought investing to life for us as kids. So whatever he didn't ultimately get fulfillment through his own professional career, he found that in sharing his love of the markets, and the Motley Fool wouldn't exist without Paul Gardner Jr.
What was the first job you had when you were a teenager?
Yeah, so I was cutting grass at Georgetown Visitation Convent. So, which is one block, by the way, from Holy Trinity Church. And my mother had gone to Georgetown Visitation, and she was like, my son is not going to do anything productive if I don't get him a job. And nobody would have hired me because I was kind of a lazy bum. And so she got the nuns to hire me. And I went and I cut grass. And, in Washington, D.C. in summer in July, it's like 98 degrees with 98% humidity. So this is no state of Maine, the breeze is awfully lovely in July, isn't it? No. And I realize you could complain about your winters, but you now live in this area, so we can complain about our summers. And yeah, that was not an easy job. But what was remarkable about that job is I would come back in, I think it was Sister Marie de Chantal. I think that was her name. I may have it wrong, but anyway, she taught computers at Georgetown Visitation. She wasn't just like a cool nun who was fun to report in how much grass I'd cut. She would then sit me down in front of the computer, and I could kind of figure out computers a little bit at an early age. Now, we're talking about right around 1980, Chris, and the computer I was looking at had punch cards came out of it as the output. We're not talking about glowing screens here. And so, but that love and attraction to new technology, it was kind of like the last half hour of my morning job that summer. And that's kind of what I think about when I think about my first job. I don't think I got paid much.
No, I wouldn't imagine the nuns were paying a lot in 1980. but by the same token, for as long as I've known you, you've always been something of an early adopter when it comes to technology. And the fact that one of the nuns helped sort of fuel that in you, that's, you can't put a price on that.
I mean, she might have been the nun who taught, I don't know, painting. And maybe I would have been a more creative, more accomplished person. But she happened to teach computers, of all things. And that really connected with me. So that's fun to think back on.
All right, let's move on to college. You went to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, degree in English and creative writing. Do I have that right?
With honors. Please, if you're asking, do you have it right? With honors.
With honors. Well done, sir. Tip of the hat. Was that a degree that you chose because you were interested in it, or was it something that you thought, oh, this is going to help me in my career? Or was it both?
It was what I was interested in. And I didn't think about my career so much. In fact, and we could go there or not, but basically I didn't have to get a job coming right out of school for a couple of different factors. And so I was writing. I was doing what I wanted to. I didn't have this idea that I shall be a writer and I shall be a professional. I was just kind of not really sure what I was going to be. And I should mention that I got a phenomenal full ride at North Carolina called a Morehead Cain Scholarship. And that's where sophomore year, I met a young woman in my creative writing class who would become my wife 5 years after that. And happy to say it's worked out 35 plus years after that. I loved Chapel Hill. I grew up in Georgetown, and anybody who's a basketball fan may remember that Georgetown and North Carolina had a national championship game when I was of age, and I hated North Carolina because I loved Georgetown. And history will show that Freddie Brown, the Georgetown point guard, right near the end of the game, turned to the side, briefly saw his teammate, then looked up court, and then passed it, kind of no look, to his teammate. But his teammate was gone. And I think Michael Jordan caught that ball, stole the ball, and North Carolina basically beat Georgetown by 1 point. And I hated my alma mater my freshman year. I cheered against our basketball team, even though I was on a full scholarship there. But I'm so glad I stayed with it. And these days, I love North Carolina in many ways, basketball included. But it's fun for me to think back on those years. I'd had such a great experience in high school. I was at a prep school in New England, and it was so different going to a big public university in the South. It was a hard transition for me from a small prep school to a big state university. I had been used to getting the lead in the musical or getting to play on the football team. And then all of a sudden I was at North Carolina, and I really, my talents were good enough for starring in anything. There were thousands of people in my class, and there was supreme talent all around me. And I never really got my legs underneath me my 4 years in Chapel Hill, but I did meet my wife.
So did you apply to other schools? Because obviously the ability to have a full scholarship from, any university, that's something that anyone would seriously consider and probably choose. But I'm curious, absent the scholarship, are you going somewhere else? Yeah,
I was going to go to Yale. My father had gone to Harvard, and I didn't even think to apply to Harvard, which I hope didn't hurt Dad. I applied for the rival, but that's where I was thinking that I would go. And then I got the nomination for the Morehead Cain Scholarship, which comes with 4 full summers. I have already explained that I'm a lazy bum unless I'm directed by adults to do something in the summer. And it wasn't just cutting grass at a convent. It was going around the world. It was spending an entire one summer at a police department in Rochester, New York, seeing all kinds of things I'll never see again, learning a lot about how cities work. I got to work on Wall Street. That was I was at Salomon Brothers one summer. That was the summer I learned I will never go and work on Wall Street. That was very helpful because that had been my plan. I entered North Carolina intending to major in drama and economics. And within a year or so, I was like, the drama department undergrad isn't really supported. It's kind of all about the graduate students. And so I don't think I'm going to do that. And economics is a lot more boring than I thought it would be. And I don't want to memorize any more Keynesian economic graphs and things. I want to write.
So you mentioned that coming right out of college in 1988, you didn't need to get a job right away. But at some point, I'm assuming for any number of reasons, you did. What is that first job experience like for you? Like what happened that made you say, or made your parents say, hey, I think it's time for you to like buckle down and get a job?
Yeah. So I came out of college, and first of all, I'd had a full scholarship, so I didn't spend any tuition money. And the last year in high school, when I turned 18, my father came up to Southborough, Massachusetts, where I was in school, and said, hey, David, here you go. This is the portfolio I've invested for you from birth. This is all you're ever getting from me. You've just turned 18. Here it is. And it wasn't enough that you'd retire on or never work, but it was enough that I didn't have to go right out full scholarship to college and get a job. And I kind of abused that because it was about 2+ years after I graduated that I still hadn't gotten a job. And I was engaged to be married to my college sweetheart. And you can imagine the rehearsal dinner toasts because Margaret was marrying David, who has no job. And that came through that rehearsal supper night for all time. So I was writing. I was sending in freelance stuff. The few things I got published were about baseball statistics, one of my favorite subjects, especially in my youth. So a love of games and numbers and baseball was sort of how there was a rotisserie baseball book that came out every year, and I got an essay published in there where I criticized the method they were using to score the game. Like they were using batting average. I was like, there are better numbers than batting average. And this is basically 1990 as the world is starting to figure out Bill James some, but most people are like, what do you mean? Batting average is fine. It's like, no, but what about on-base percentage or slugging? Come on, people. Anyway, so that's sort of what I was writing, but I was getting rejected far more than I was ever getting paid. And I was then married. And we moved up to Washington, D.C., and my newlywed wife said, David, you might like this. And back then, Chris, you'll remember there were these things called classified ads in newspapers that were print, and that's where you would look for jobs. And she had clipped something that said, writer-researcher Louis Rukeyser's Wall Street. And she said, what's really great about this is it's a 6-block walk from our house. And I was thinking that's not bad. And I was kind of feeling, having now seen talented friends of mine that I'd graduated with who had just finished their second year of law school or had gotten their third promotion. And I'm sitting there going, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. And I'm 25, but I did get the job. And within a month or two, Chris, I started going, you know what? This is not a great job. And the reason was it was creatively deadening. I would turn in an article and it would be edited so thoroughly that any color or fun that I'd try to inject in my writing was gone, stripped. And it was just kind of plain Jane stuff month after month. And I asked my editor, is this always how it's going to be? And quite reasonably, she said back to me, this is Louis Rukeyser, who hosts Wall Street Week on PBS, and it was the longest running show on PBS. This is his newsletter. He's the color. He's the fun. He writes the first few pages. The rest of it needs to contrast with that. And I was like, wait, contrast with fun and color?
The rest of it needs to be boring as hell.
And so I was like, is this going to change? And she's like, no, it's not. I was like, I think I'm going to quit. And they said, well, would you stay on a few more months? And I did. So my one job, my first and only job, because anything I've done since has just been a calling and a passion, not a job. My one job lasted 6 months. Chris, I'm now unemployed. The one job I'd had at the age of 26 at this point, I hadn't even held down for a year. So obviously we needed to start something ourselves.
So you have to have talked with your wife about money before you got married. There's no way she's too smart a person to just go into that marriage being like, this is going to work out. Like what? Do you have a sense of because one of the things that's come up on this podcast a number of times is people not necessarily having very explicit conversations about money with the person that they are on their way to marrying, but having conversations where they each get a sense of how the other person values money. And that serves as sort of the North Star. Like, hey, we don't need to necessarily break down how we're going to be paying bills every month, that sort of thing. I have a sense of how you think about money. You have a sense of how I think about money. And that's enough for now.
Yeah. And since Margaret and I kind of grew up together, we were dating from sophomore year of college. as we got married at what was a very young age back then and would still be today, 24. I think we were the first among our friend group to get hitched, but we'd spent 5 years getting to know each other. So she knew that I loved the stock market. I started a stock market club when I was at UNC Chapel Hill. And this was something that, as she moved to Charlottesville to get a graduate degree, and I just sort of moved along with her in my own apartment, sitting there with my spreadsheets and my baseball and my stocks. And what is the guy doing exactly? She knew that it was a calling and a passion of mine. She also came from a family that was a business family that did well with money. Her dad was an accomplished businessman. And when we married, she brought along a little portfolio of her own. And what's funny about that is she right away gave it over for me to manage because that's not really her thing. And I love this. So, of course, she's like, go ahead, David. And as the years went by, 5, 10, 15 years later, consistently I'm outperforming my own portfolio with Margaret's portfolio. And I realize couples have many different ways of like managing their money life. For us, it's all kind of one. It's all blended together. It's sort of like both. We have a 2-flavor ice cream cone, but it's the same cone. But I was watching her flavor just crush it. And in general, it's because I was buying stuff to just hold it and not be any more active than that for her. Whereas for me, I'd be a little bit more aggressive. And, I'm still a buy to hold person. It's not like I was a day trader ever, which I never, ever would want to be and wasn't. But it was just funny for us both to watch me outperform me each time with her portfolio. But we were very comfortable talking about money. And one thing I did maniacally is Quicken. Those who remember Intuit's first great product before QuickBooks and TurboTax, which they bought, it was Quicken. And I was all about taking every receipt, like, $1.17 at the Walgreens for bubblegum. Great. I entered everything I had because, again, I love numbers. I love Moneyball, baseball statistics. I wanted to feel total command and control, not over her or myself, but just over the knowledge of like, how much money do we have? Where's it all going? And of course, a lot of that was tracking our portfolio. Those numbers go up if you're doing a good job over time, but your spending, eats into that. And I was just keeping track of everything. And I don't think it was annoying. I mean, she would just hand me the slips and I'd type them in myself and just kind of keep track. But that was sort of our early life as a newlywed couple in money.
So you touched on something that comes up in your book. It actually comes up very early in your book. One of the first pages you write, and I'm quoting here, "I'm here to prepare you for rethinking your relationship with money and what works in investing." And throughout the book, you touch on the topic of risk, debunking the idea that investing in stocks is risky, while also recognizing that everyone has their own risk tolerance. Everyone has their own sleep number.
You bet.
And you've said before that that your own risk tolerance is higher than the average investor. And what I'm wondering is, has that always been the case? And if not, how did you become more comfortable with risk over time?
Yeah, I would say it's generally always been the case. I mean, I will just say I've always been comfortable taking risks. I've taken risks throughout my life. I don't know what it is, but I've always been wired in such a way. Also, I'm just so optimistic that I don't think there's going to be downside. And of course there is, but I don't worry about that or go in fearing that. I generally think things are going to work and let's try this. And, you've been with us for so many years, The Motley Fool. It's generally worked. We've had some tough times too. And so in a lot of ways, there's just sort of a can-do spirit around optimism that I think has been felt by other family members of mine. And it's just always been in me. So with that said, Chris, I definitely, back in the day when I first started at the age of 18, managing my own portfolio that my dad had handed me, I would have been pretty bummed out if any stock had dropped 50%. Like that would have been hard for me emotionally. I think at that early stage, I would have regretted whatever I'd done. And by the way, I did have those stocks. Most of all, I remember early days for me was I was trying to double my money every 18 months in a stock, and then move on to the next one, and then move on to the next one. And it's not like, I was betting it all there or anything. It's just like that was sort of my mentality. And it wasn't even being crazy. Like occasionally you can do that if the market's good or you find a good company. 18 months, stock doubles, sure. I mean, some stocks will double in a year just from their 52-week low. It was so short term in retrospect. So there I was.
I was just going to say, it's antithetical to
it's true.
The long-term mentality.
Yeah. And I didn't have that back then. I mean, you tell me if this is true of you. It's sort of ironic, isn't it? The older I get, the longer term I think. And you'd think it should be the exact opposite, but that's been my experience. So I started with a shorter term horizon for success and failure. So a 50% loss when you're only playing an 18-month game and you're trying to just hit 100% maybe, 50% is pretty devastating. What I've really shed over the decades is any particular concern about any size loss, because I know the worst it can ever be is 100%. And that limits your downside in a world where your upside is unlimited. And I'm really trying to pound that home in my book.
Want to find your own rule breaker stocks? When you're done listening to this episode, you can get started by checking out TIKR. TIKR gives you the same kind of professional grade data that Wall Street analysts use, but TIKR makes it simple enough for everyday investors like you and me. Already trusted by thousands of investors across America and around the world, just go to TIKR, type in a ticker symbol, type in a company name, Apple, Oracle, NVIDIA, that company you just heard about, that company you just saw a headline of. Type it in and you will instantly see years of financials, analyst forecasts, and insider trades all in one place. And you can try it for free when you go to tikr.com/unplugged. Use it to track what legendary investors like Warren Buffett and other big name money managers are buying and selling. TIKR is an easy way to get investing ideas and learn from the best. Save time, speed up your analysis, and try it for free by going to tikr.com/unplugged. That's TIKR.com/unplugged. It is the cleanest, easiest way to look deeper into any stock and see what the pros are doing. Click the link in the show notes or go to tikr.com/unplugged. All right, let's get back to David Gardner. Let's move on to the speed round. What is a thing that you have bought that makes you happy?
I would say Tesla. And I will say both the product and the stock. And if you've done well or played it right, the stock can kind of pay for the product. And the stock is literally up more than 100 times in value since I first recommended it in Rule Breakers of the Motley Fool services back in 2011. So it's just been a phenomenal investment. But this is not playing up a stock, hyping a stock return. I just think it's an amazing consumer product. And obviously, there are many other electric cars on the road today. So I'm not thinking with 2025 eyes right now. I'm seeing the world in the year 2012-13 when I bought my first Model S. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. I feel like I'm driving in the future.
At the other end of the spectrum, have you ever made a purchase that you regret and sometimes you still think about it?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier I'm an early adopter, and anybody who's an early adopter probably has a closet full of gadgets that they bought as an early adopter that they're not still using and that maybe didn't really work in the world at large. So I can think of a number of such things. I mean, I'm even going to call out one here, I guess, that is quite a good product, but I just haven't used it, and it's the Oculus Quest. It's the VR headset.
Oh, the headset, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a cool product. And there's a fair amount of software, and I'm a lifelong video gamer. I love games, and I play games every day: board games, video games, card games, etc. I am a gamer, and I just don't want to close myself off to the world and not be able to see anything around me and immerse myself in this immersive experience, at least in any kind of regular, repeating way that would justify the amount of money I paid for the product that I've used once.
Look, it's the only way you're going to get to hang out in Gotham City is when you play Batman Arkham
a friend
Shadow.
Of mine did some of the radio voice for I think one of the Batman VR
Arkham
games.
Shadow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Financial reporter Rob
Yeah.
Touchdown.
Yeah. So there you go.
What is the last thing you splurged on just for yourself, not for your wife or your kids or anyone else, just for you?
Yeah, I'm doing that on a regular basis, and it goes back to games. So anybody
I was going to say,
who,
and is it a board game?
yeah, it basically is, and it's not a board game because
okay.
I own hundreds of board games. So but I wouldn't call that splurge. That's just me being a gamer. The splurge, thanks to sites like Kickstarter and GameFound, which is like a gamer's version of Kickstarter, is what happens these days, which is that they announce that there will be a new game that will ship in a year. And if we hit this pledging level, all of the wooden pieces will now be gold chrome. And if we hit this level, we're going to add 4 more packs of cards and upgrade the quality of the playing card. And if we hit this level, there'll be an entire castle that will just show up in a box along with the game to just bling the heck out of the game. And so anybody who is a tabletop gamer and has gone the Kickstarter route is nodding their head along with me, because you know that these days you can just bling out like crazy ways board games. And it's not even that you have to be a hobbyist and do it yourself. It's just coming from the industry. And so you could buy the game for $69 or Chris Hill, you could buy for $169 with, I don't know, rotating disco balls, dice that light up as you throw them, and all wood components, not plastic, and the list goes on. So I am not every time springing for the splurge version of a good game on Kickstarter, but yeah, I do it frequently.
What is one thing about money that you wish you knew earlier?
I guess for me, it would just be that, a personal response is, David, don't put too much in real estate. Like, don't invest in real estate. You're not going to do very well in real estate. Like, that's your house and you love your house, but don't sell Netflix to buy your house. Your house might go up in value a little bit. You don't have a very good eye for this, David. So 10 years later, it's probably going to be more than you paid for it. But oh my gosh, you sold Netflix to buy that house. Did you run the numbers? Did you think about that? So I would say that an appreciation of how mediocre I would be as a real estate investor is something I would have loved my older self to tell my young self to be slightly more awesome.
What is a charitable cause that you like to support?
Oh, the Motley Fool Community Foundation. I mean, our, in our 4th decade of the Motley Fool, we thought, let's start a foundation. But it's not a corporate foundation. This is not like money from the Motley Fool. This is our community. And so this is an opportunity for people to band together with other fellow fools and focus on financial freedom, which is what the Motley Fool has been trying to drive through this world for about 4 decades now. And you don't always get a stock market portfolio from your dad when you're 18. An incredible blessing I will never take for granted. Most people are scrapping just to save their first dollar. 2/3 of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So yeah, the Motley Fool can extend itself and become more effective and more powerful in the world if we're not just speaking to people who do have money already. That's how we butter our bread as a business, stock market advice for people who want that. But to go out one more concentric circle, which is what the foundation does, and try to identify ways to help people living paycheck to paycheck save that first dollar and get invested.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series that has money as a through line?
I mean, it's running through everything, right? Let's go. Is this fair? Moneyball. I mean, you could certainly argue. Fair. Yeah, I mean, in the end, Moneyball is sort of about investing, and it's just investing in this player, not that player. And Bill James, the hero, who doesn't really even appear in the movie, actually, he makes a brief there's an early mention briefly of James, but mostly it's about Brad Pitt, playing the general manager of the Oakland A's, Billy Beane. But I mean, it's a great movie. I think it's one of my 20 favorite movies. I love baseball. There are a lot of baseball analogies in Rule Breaker Investing. And I think that for me, that was a formative time in my life where I was like, don't you realize people are wrong? Like, you shouldn't bunt. And stolen bases are only good if you're succeeding more than 66% of the time. Otherwise, that one caught stealing wipes out every 2 stolen bases. So just because somebody has 32 stolen bases, if they've been caught 20 times, they're actually killing their team. They're not helping. People don't understand this. People were not running the math. Baseball world was very closed. And so I kind of love that movie as an iconic true story of how people began to change their minds. And for me, that's what I'm trying to do, not with baseball, but with the stock market, is to have people redefine what investing is and re-ask themselves what overvalued means and what are the stocks that are really going to win. And I mean, win big.
Last thing is a penny for your thoughts. And this can be about money, but it doesn't have to be. It can be about anything. It's just any sort of life wisdom that you've picked up along your 50 plus years that you can share with people who are listening.
Well, obviously, my tendency is to want to give an investment lesson. But what's really true about the word investing is if you look at the Latin root, it's about wearing the clothes, putting on the clothes, like priestly vestment. That is the same root. So when I really think about investing, it's just any time you're planting something or risking something and you're not going to get an immediate return and you're hoping that you're right. And if you are, you will be more prosperous. And that occurs on a daily basis for all of us. And I'm not talking about the stock market right now. So we're all making investments of time and money all the time. But ultimately, what's underneath making better investing decisions, I think, is optimism. So I want to end with a quick thought about that. It was reputed to have been said by Henry Ford. I don't believe you could prove he ever said it, but I'll still say Henry Ford once said, "Whether you think you can or whether you think you cannot, you're right." And whether or not he actually said it, I love that line. I really do believe that optimism is not just a state of mind, it is a creative force. The world is to the people who say, yes, we can. And the chances of people who are saying, no, we cannot, being productive in that context are very, very low. So somewhere near the end of my book, I basically just go full on chapter about what I think matters as much as anything else, which is rational optimism. I think it's rational to be optimistic. And the reason that really works in investing is most of the headlines are driving fear. Most of the news is clickbait, trying to make you worried. There's a great line stolen from a friend of mine. It's actually from Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired, co-founder of Wired, who says, if you read the news, you'll conclude things have never been worse. But if you read history, you'll conclude things have never been better. And that is so helpful for me, and I think for all of us, to keep in mind, A, you're investing your money today. You better believe in the future. I do. And B, most people don't. And that's not just true today. Matt Ridley in his book, The Rational Optimist, shows that's been true for centuries. Every time a new generation is born, they think it's going to go apocalyptic by the end. And my kids won't have it as good as I've had it. That's not been the case. Generation after generation. That will not be the case again. And so that optimism will propel you not just to better investing returns, but I think to better performance across all areas of your life. So yeah, I'm a big fan of optimism.
There you go. David's new book is Rule Breaker Investing: How to Pick the Best Stocks of the Future and Build Lasting Wealth. It is an absolute winner of a book, so check it out. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.